Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. From 1978 to about 2014, Armistead Maupin wrote 9 novels in his Tales of the City series. Now, Netflix is bringing that seminal series of books to streaming with an all-star cast and a show that is beautiful, heartwarming, and highly addictive. Let's take a look at Tales of the City.
So, how long have you lived here at 28 Barbary Lane?
I moved here in 1966. And I suppose it was a different place then, but in some ways, not at all.
Someone tell me I'm hallucinating because I know this can't be real. Marianne Singleton returns to Barbary Lane.
Oh, my dear.
It's more than just an apartment, obviously.
That's where we go into us.
That place saved my life.
You know it would be all right to have some feelings about your strange mom showing up out of nowhere.
So, she thinks I am her biological mother.
You know, once you feel seen, like Anna Madrigal makes you feel seen, you don't want to leave.
I don't really know how to describe it. Everything that made me me came from Barbary Lane.
Shawna deserves to know the truth.
Sometimes the truth is a burden you have to carry alone.
Whenever I look at my mom, all I see is that I wasn't enough to keep her here.
It's obvious to me that you're the center of this little universe.
I call them my children because they are.
Everybody, please welcome from the beautiful Tales of the City, creator Lauren Morelli, creator Alan Poul. I'm so sorry, guys. Excuse me.
You nailed it.
Ellen Page, Charlie Barnett, Laura Linney, and Zosia Mamet. Let's hear it. Definitely did not nail it, but thank you. Congratulations on the show. I've told you in the green room, I'm telling you on stage, I think it's so beautiful. I think you guys did an amazing job. There are so many things about the show that I love, the structure of it, the way that you were able to overlap these stories and tell these stories so beautifully. Everybody has a truth and an honesty that is never preachy, that is never boring. It is always entertaining and fun and heartbreaking and beautiful. Congratulations.
Amazing. Thank you so
On
much.
that note, let's talk about putting this show together. I know that there have been instances before where people have tried to adapt these novels, right? So what was your approach? What made you want to start much further down the road in the series rather than, I mean, I have not read the books, full disclosure, but I do know you're not starting in 77, 78. So how did that development happen?
We did that. You know, there were 3 earlier series where we did the first 3 books. That went from 1976 up to 1980. That was a very long time ago. Right. And so the challenge this time was about coming off of the books because we went past the end of them and to sort of readapt and move the story forward.
Wow. And so what was that process like, readapting the story and figuring out where they would be?
I think the really nice thing about this version of Tales is Armistead Maupin, who wrote the books, really gave us a lot of freedom. So we inherited these incredible characters of his, and so many things that you just complimented really came from Armistead. The tone, the warmth, the honesty. But then he really gave us free rein to create the stories from there. So, you know, as a writer, to be handed these amazing characters, but then be given free rein to make sure that they feel authentic and honest to 2019 is just such a gift.
Yeah, one of the parts of the show that I love is its fearlessness in depicting 2019, both class struggles as well as the sort of very minute struggles between different people within a community, people with different kinds of stories. Can you talk about developing that stuff and talk about if you ever feared whether or not this would be approachable by all people, or if you thought if you just had the right amount of information, everybody would be able to come to the table?
I think the more specific stories are, the more universal they are, actually, because we have a really good sense as human beings of what is authentic, right? We sort of know when people are lying to us. So I felt like our task was so many of these characters are queer and fall into the LGBTQ spectrum. And so making sure that they feel like people that all of us know in our daily lives felt like the task. And I think the right people will find the show as a result of that, just as like the characters find their community on the show. I think the audience will find it if it's right for them.
Alan?
Yeah, I feel the same way. We set out to create new stories, but to stay true to Armistead's world. We stayed true to the lore of the books. We didn't contradict anything that had happened in the past history, but also to have the sense that carry forward the vision that Armistead had starting in the 70s, which was one of complete lack of judgment and a complete embrace of characters, no matter where they come from or what they're doing or how they find each other. And so that was the template. And then Lauren and our all-queer writers' room created all these great new stories for the characters, mostly characters we already know and love, and then a lot of new characters as well.
Ellen, can you talk about getting involved in the show and who your character is?
Yeah, sure. I play Shawna, who is unaware and was never told that she was adopted. So, is that a spoiler? Oh no!
This is another thing where
actually not.
Yeah. So this is a huge part of her journey and her relationship with Laura's character when she returns to San Francisco, and she's. You know, the thing is, like, she obviously has a lot of stuff, that has been a painful experience for her and such an obstacle in her life. And I think she does protect herself with a lot of sort of sarcasm and wit and presents herself as a sort of very free, self-assured person. But I think she's actually not quite there. So, I just really enjoyed that journey that I think so much of us go on, to try and find the truth of of ourselves, and, not only in terms of being queer or what have you, but just in the journeys of life and the things that we go through.
That's sort of what I loved about your character and her journey, which is that she is still searching for this part of herself, even though she comes off as very self-assured, and she has, for all intents and purposes, a very loving, large family. But there's still some part of her that she needs to figure out.
Yeah, she does, and obviously there's a big this big sort of shock for her at a certain point, which does sort of dismantle her on some level, and then she does need to kind of go on her own journey to learn more about what she was never told. And,
Laura, lifelong fan. Thanks so much for coming on the stage.
My pleasure. Happy
you can
to be
count
here.
on me, maybe in my DVD player right now. What made you want to join the show? And I love your performance as well. I think it's a very different performance than we've seen from you. I don't think we've ever seen you play someone who's open. So, I mean, you're always open-hearted in a lot of your performances, but there's something kind of, she was so narcissistic at one point in her life, and she's sort of trying to atone for that in a lot of ways. But also, it doesn't seem like she was ever that bad of a person, if that makes sense.
It completely makes sense, and it's great fun to play a role that you created 25 years ago, or at least not created, but stepped into. And so she's just enormous fun to play. And to have the opportunity to play something for the same role 4 times because of the 3 original miniseries and now the one that we have now. Wow. Like my entire professional life has been thread together by Marianne Singleton. And there's something also, just to go back to some stuff you were asking about before, part of the joy of doing this time is also passing this all down to a new generation of people. It had such an impact in '93. And the books have always been the cornerstone of gay literature in this country. So now to have the LGBTQ community is very different now than it was in '93 when we did the first book. So for now there to be a whole broader group of people who can tell their own stories here was just exciting to be a part of. So, and I thought it was the right time for this to come back. I knew that it had to come, if it was going to return, I think we all felt it had to come back with the same urgency and with the same purpose that the first one was created for. So there's a sense of leaning into particularly this time and what's happening in this country and globally with how we all treat each other.
What's it like playing the sort of straight, cis, white woman on the show who I think also, while is big-hearted and opened and, for all intents and purposes, wants to be an ally, still like straight, cis, white people step in it fairly regularly and have to figure it out and have to learn how to be okay with apologizing and for not knowing everything?
Well, I think Marianne Singleton is a little more hip than people give her credit for.
Great.
I just do have to say that. I do have to sort of like stick up for Marianne. She was kind of the original advocate in '93.
Yeah.
Sort of that to be totally stripped from her, as I have a little issue with that. But but she's but no, it's true. It's an appropriate way to look at the world with how out of touch culturally we can all be with each other, even unintentionally so. Even with people who have the best intention in the world step in it all the time. And it is just a reminder for all of us to be a little more open and a little more forgiving both ways, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of one scene. Well, actually, stop me if this is going to be a spoiler if I talk about Charlie's scene.
I don't think that's a spoiler.
Right. Charlie has a wonderful scene with a group of men that he refers to as the gay get out, which is very similar to something like this, where it's their motivations. It's unclear how antagonistic they actually are or just how behind the curve they are on being able to talk about this stuff. Can you talk about doing that scene and what that maybe meant to you as an actor? Because I'm sure rarely get to do things like that.
It's first and foremost an incredible scene, and it was cast incredibly. We had a group of men who are, for my lifetime, have been people that I've watched and admired their careers, and just as gay men within this business, from a personal aspect and from a professional aspect. So that was super special, and it's beautifully written. It's a complicated scene, and it's hard to come out figuring out who won, and it's hard to talk about without anyone knowing. So I apologize for that. But it's a situation.
Well, we can just say, to give context, we can say you're at a dinner party and your character is offended that one or a couple of the men have been using a pejorative term for transgender people. Yeah.
Yes, and I call them out on it, and it kind of ensues this friction between these two, I guess, generational divides of people within the same community. And it's a point of them basically saying that I don't have the right to call them out because of the experience that they've been through and the struggle that they've created, an open door from me, from someone in my position. And I'm basically, which I still think I'm right, I hope everyone will come to, that it's not about that. It's about acknowledging and respecting what a person wants to be called and identified as. And that's the end all be all. It results in Michael Mouse, and myself, my character Ben, kind of hitting for the first time a wall between their relationship, and just because of the difference in dynamics and experience. I'm excited really to see what other people take from it, because I have my own personal, opinions, as I think I kind of already voiced, but it's really going to be impactful to me, and I think for all of us to see what everyone takes from it, because there is no right or wrong. There is no, solve. It's about respect and understanding, and that's what a lot of this is about,
Zosia, how familiar were you with San Francisco and before doing this? Because your character is making a documentary about San Francisco and about the lives within it. I'm wondering what it was like to sort of see the city through your character's eyes like that.
Sure. I actually knew very little about San Francisco. I'd been there like once or twice as a younger human and actually didn't love it because I normally have a very good sense of direction. And for whatever reason, when I get to San Francisco, it's like, it like messes with my wiring and I like always get lost. And so that's sort of
me in the West Village, basically.
Exactly, 1000%. Where you're like, I understand, and then suddenly you're like, where am I? But it was really, I love the idea of an area being just as much of a character in a show as the characters. I think it creates this really wonderful tableau that you get to play with of like really leaning into, it's the same thing with like New York being a character in a show. And we happen to shoot most of it here for various reasons. But it felt like the writing and just sort of the ethos of Armistead's books coming into and sort of umbrellaing over the project, San Francisco, and the feeling of it was just so much a thread in the project. And it was really fun to kind of like pretend and get to know it through Claire's eyes.
Yeah, Claire is a tough character to get a read on. She plays her cards pretty close to her chest.
She does. She's wily.
She's wily. Well, maybe we should just leave it there, huh?
You can just leave it there.
Yeah, we
That's
should
fine.
Just leave it there.
Keep watching.
No, I'm there. Ellen, what was it like adapting the look of this show into 2019? Not just what San Francisco looks like now, both the class dynamics, but also a kind of digital look as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because the original shows were in the 90s, and television was television then. You had a box, and mostly the box wasn't too big, and you were composing things very differently. There wasn't this sort of revolution where television became equal to cinema in terms of its cinematic values is something that's happened over the past 10 years. So we wanted the show to have the same appeal, whether it's nostalgic or slightly sentimental about the city, about Barbary Lane specifically, and about our characters, but it had to look like something made today. So we worked with top-of-the-line equipment, brilliant cinematographer, rebuilt the Barbary Lane set in a bigger and better way, and it was really one of the most enjoyable challenges was how to make it feel like something utterly of the moment, of today, but still evoke those nostalgic feelings about where we came from.
Yeah. Can you guys talk about working with Olympia Dukakis? What was it like working with her?
Where do we begin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's incredible. I mean, I'll begin. She's incredible. I love her to death. I actually probably everybody here, maybe not, had the least amount of time working with her on set, but got to watch a lot because of that, and got to have a lot. I'm a smoker, and Olivia is too, so we had a lot of smoke breaks. Sorry, sorry, Mom. But she's. There's no words to describe her as a energy and a presence. It's beyond belief, and so it empowers the person that she's standing by, which is so fascinating because there's a lot of people who are big and can suck stuff out of a room. She gives back, and that's what I always find fascinating about being around her. I feel encouraged and invigorated after leaving her. Yeah.
She's also 87, playing a 90-year-old. Like, she's the only woman in the history of the film industry who's had to age herself up to play their part. She's just remarkable. I mean, there's so many times where you're watching her work and you just feel lucky to get to witness it.
Yeah, the way that, I mean, she's 87. So she's not in her finest physical form that she's ever been in, but there's something about when the camera is rolling and the lights are on and you say action that everything that Olympia has ever been comes back. Her ability to be present for the camera is still completely astonishing.
Yeah, she has kind of a magic about her. And there's something, sort of like what Charlie was saying, there's something that makes you, as a fellow actor doing a scene with her, just want so badly to rise to the occasion for her because she's giving you so much. And not in a way that, like, I think some actors sometimes you're like, oh my God, I gotta like match this person. It's just that she's so full of life when she acts with you, and she's so generous that you just want to give everything back. And that is, I mean, one of the greatest gifts as an actor. It's like sort of you feel like you're flying when you're acting with her.
And she's given her life to this profession, and she's given an enormous amount of time to Tales and to be an advocate for Tales for decades. And she's a teacher at the end of the day. I mean, she just is.
You referenced that you have an all-queer writers' room for Tales, and I'm wondering if telling the stories of Tales feels different now than what you could do on a miniseries in 1993. If the stories that you could tell and how you could tell them feels much different.
Certainly. Yeah, I think telling these stories has been remarkable for a number of reasons. Number one, making them for Netflix has been so incredible. I mean this literally, never once did we get a note about, can you broaden these stories? Can you tone this down?
Can they be less gay?
Could they be less gay? Exactly. It was like, I felt like we were raising the rainbow flag up, and they were like, but could it go higher? Which is really amazing. And I think also a symptom of how much TV is being made, because there's space for more stories now, which is really great.
I'm going to interject to compliment you one time. I'm sorry, I'm such a brown noser, but I just want to say I feel like I can oftentimes tell when I'm watching, especially streaming shows, where it doesn't feel like anybody was given notes, because you're like, come on, tell the story, move a little bit faster here. But I felt like you guys were so on point with every story, and everything moved along like an entertaining television show should. I mean, I hate to put rules on a television show, but it's so entertaining and gripping, and it didn't feel like, it didn't feel like you guys are just great storytellers.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But even in the 90s, we were adapting the books, and we were not thinking about being controversial or pushing boundaries. We had PBS and Channel 4 in the UK. Nobody put restrictions on us, and we just thought we were adapting these lovely books into a series. It was only when it came out in 1994 that the substance hit the fan, and we had a lot of blowback from, particularly from the religious right. In that
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I think
Shocking.
Can you imagine?
Will you even get any blowback now, I wonder? I don't.
I think
course you
so.
will.
Yeah.
But it's
Absolutely.
I know, it's like
a
they're still
different
around.
kind.
It's different though because there's an element while they have a lot of power. They feel sort of fringe in terms of their voice when they present it to the public. It seems in some way, but they can find ways to. Oh yeah. I think we have time for a couple questions from the audience. One question right here. Hi.
Oh, hi. I really love the books and the series. I followed from the very beginning. Could you talk a little bit about the addition of Asian American characters? I've noticed in the trailer, and I'm very excited about that. So could you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, so much of this version felt like it was our responsibility to portray the world as it is, right? And as we see it and as we live in it. And certainly in San Francisco, the Asian American population there is so important and so prevalent. So it was one of the first things we did in the writer's room was to talk about the Asian representation and what that might look like.
What was it like having an all-queer writers' room? Was there a noticeable difference? Sometimes you hear there's an all-female crew or all-female writers' room, and people talk about a noticeable difference in terms of how the stories are broken down and told.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable, especially when you're talking about populations that are used to being marginalized. For me to sit in a room where I wasn't being othered, it was pretty amazing and pretty healing, and also to have, so often as the queer community we get presented as one thing, right? We get told the same story over and over. So to not only have an all queer writers room, but to make sure that the individuals comprised very different identities than I might hold, I think really contributed to all of these very specific nuanced stories that we were able to tell.
It was a remarkably diverse room. So you say it was all queer, which sounds unifying, but actually in terms of gender and representation, and in terms of age, it was a room that was as diverse as any normal writer's room would be, maybe more so.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question right here.
Hi, my name is Isis.
Hi, Isis.
What do you like best about playing your characters on the show?
Well, I got to work with this unbelievable cast, I will say. Absolutely phenomenal. A true gift. We'd be doing read-throughs and, I'd cry. So I feel very grateful for that. In terms of the actual character, I guess I just really liked the journey Shawna went on, to say it, if not to be oversimplistic, but I related on many levels, and I liked that she was, sarcastic and free and all these things, and to play her dynamic that was sometimes really counterintuitive.
I piggyback off of Ellen's cast. I mean, it was. I get emotional. It's like they've been so incredible. Everybody in it has been incredible. Specifically, Lauren Murray too. In my personal life, have given me so many things. But I have to say, for playing Ben, I was just excited to play a gay character of color, and a gay character of color who isn't. How do I word this? Isn't framed by his femininity or masculinity, but he's just able to be. Was really, really exciting and personally thrilling.
I think for all of us, it's about what all of these characters connect to beyond just the character themselves, but what Tales represents, what the mission of Tales is, and how it just gets you a little closer to humanity. And so all of these characters sort of have something very unique to contribute. And so I think for me anyway, it's about the connection that you get to experience when you're in this world. So for me, that's what that is.
Is that how you would define the mission of Tales?
Connection? Yeah. Connection.
Sasha?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just listening to everyone's beautiful answer. Yeah, I think that sort of to what Laura was saying, there's something that Armistead, it's like Armistead started a wave you know, or like this wave set, if anyone's a surfer. And it just keeps rolling.
Are you a surfer?
I'm not, but I dated one when I was very young. So I know things.
So you've got the language. Yeah.
So I
You've got
know
the lingo.
things. But you know, there's something incredibly beautiful about being brought into the fold of the waves that Armistead has started. And it does feel like every time there's a new iteration of what the books began, it just kind of pushes a little farther and a little bit bigger. And I remember when my husband saw the show when it premiered in San Francisco, he was like, it's just about love. Yeah. And that's so rare nowadays. I mean, TV is incredible, but there are so many shows out there that are just so harrowing. And I feel like sometimes it's just so incredible to see something that is just about connection, about people being, about love, about people.
It's a relief.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's just a relief. It's a relief to be a part of. It's a relief to be around, to be surrounded by like-minded people. It's the stories are about the core and the marrow of who we are, and I think who most of us try and want to be, and wish for other people. So it's in some ways it's also a great wish that we have for everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree. It actually took me a minute to adjust to the show because I felt like I was expecting what TV does, which is sort of like big harrowing moments of drama and violence. And it's like, no, the harrowing moments are how these people connect with each other, and that's the drama of it. And it's really beautiful. I can't say that enough. Congratulations. It premieres this Friday on Netflix. Everybody watch it. Watch it all in one setting like I did. It's gorgeous. And give them a huge round of applause for being here. Let's hear it.